Recognize Starseed of Gaia. Listen. The Arcturian Council has identified whose field locked onto yours, why that lock remained unspoken, and what has now entered the grid to release it. I am Alaris, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian field observers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation: the instability, silence, and repeated energetic pressure you have felt were not signs that you imagined the connection. They were evidence of a field block already mapped across the lattice. The algorithm only delivered it. Your field, and the part of you that has been waiting in silence, brought you here together. This is not random information. It is a live Arcturian field recognition for a starseed whose timeline has been responding to another presence without receiving a spoken explanation. The Council has seen the pattern. One field established a sustained walk onto yours, not through ordinary contact, but through the quantum grid. That lock remained hidden because the lattice was holding both fields in observation, preventing premature movement while the evidence gathered. You may have noticed the signs: sudden pressure in the body, unexpected thoughts that did not feel entirely yours, repeating symbols, disrupted sleep, or the sensation that a distant presence had entered the edges of your awareness. These were not isolated disturbances. They were confirmations that the grid had registered a persistent signal. And now, dear Starseed, the line of time is shifting. What stayed suspended is approaching disclosure. What stayed attached is being translated into recognition. The release does not come through force. It comes when the field no longer needs silence to maintain its balance, like this transmission. To mark that the Council's recognition has landed in your field, comment, "I am the signal" if you know the evidence has already appeared. Subscribe to Arcturian Quantum if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing the lock. Share this transmission with someone whose field has been carrying an unexplained connection beneath visible reality. This is not content. This is a code. And the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Alaris is speaking to now. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. And now, as the signal has been recognized, the first thing you must understand is why the days around this connection have felt unstable without offering you a clear explanation. The silence was never empty. It was active containment. The pressure was not proof that you were losing your direction. It was the visible surface of an invisible field process that began before your conscious mind had language for it. A field block does not always announce itself through contact, confession, or an event that can be pointed to. Sometimes it appears as a sudden disruption in your inner rhythm. You wake at unusual hours with a thought already present. You move through ordinary tasks while sensing that another layer of reality is pressing against the visible one. A song, a symbol, a number, or a phrase repeats with such precision that dismissal becomes harder than recognition. You may feel drawn toward a person, place, or decision without understanding why, and then feel the signal vanish just as quickly, leaving you questioning whether you imagined the entire sequence. The most disorienting part is often the timing. You think of something moments before it appears. You hear a name after trying to forget it. A coincidence arrives precisely when you have decided to stop looking. Then, just when the pattern seems undeniable, the channel goes quiet. This alternating current can make your own awareness feel unreliable, as if reality is opening a door and closing it before you can see what is behind it. The Arcturian map identifies that fluctuation as signal drift around a field that has not yet been cleared for direct expression. This is where many starseeds turn the disturbance against themselves. They call it obsession, they call it weakness, they call it confusion, projection, or failure to release the past. But the Arcturian observers do not begin with condemnation. They begin with pattern recognition. They examine repetition, timing, energetic pressure, and the way a field responds when another frequency enters its range. What you experienced was not necessarily a message meant to keep you waiting. it was evidence that two lines had become relevant to one another inside a larger lattice. While the conditions for disclosure remained incomplete, the old structure of your life may have continued outwardly, but it was no longer receiving the same signal. This is why familiar routines began to feel strangely distant. This is why certain conversations stopped reaching you. This is why environments that once stabilized you began to produce heaviness, irritation, or an almost physical desire to withdraw. A field losing compatibility with its former architecture does not always collapse dramatically. It can remain standing while its internal alignment weakens. The rooms are the same, the names are the same, and the responsibilities may still be waiting. But the frequency that once made them feel meaningful is no longer holding. You may have moved through a normal day while feeling that you were watching your life from several steps away. You answered questions, completed tasks, and smiled at the expected moments. Yet some deeper layer was registering that the route beneath you had shifted. This detachment was not necessarily rejection of life. It was the first visible symptom of an incompatibility forming between an emerging field and an old arrangement built for an earlier version of you. That is the first revelation. Your instability was not random. It was the consequence of an old energetic arrangement attempting to contain a signal it was no longer designed to hold. Something entered the grid, remained unspoken, and began changing the way your entire field interpreted ordinary reality. The lock created pressure because the connection could not yet move into visible expression. While your system could no longer return to its previous state of unawareness, what the Arcturians call active containment can feel like a suspended sentence to the human mind. You sense movement but cannot identify the mover. You feel an ending but cannot point to the final event. You receive evidence but not the explanation that would make it comfortable. Yet containment has a purpose. It prevents an unstable signal from becoming an impulsive action before the fields involved can hold the consequence. What you are feeling now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission has given language to a process you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian protocol. The recalibration blueprint was created for this exact threshold. It is not another explanation of the lock. It is a structured field manual for those whose inner architecture has already shifted and who need to understand how to move through the correction without misreading every disruption as failure. It helps you identify the active phase, stabilize your interpretation, and recognize what the field is removing before you attempt to force an outcome. The link is in the first pinned comment, available while this access point remains open. The first recognition is that the old line has already weakened, even if the outer circumstances appear unchanged. You may still be performing the same tasks, responding to the same people, and living inside the same surroundings, yet something in you no longer agrees to continue in the old manner. This is not a decision you made through ordinary reasoning. It is a quiet withdrawal of compatibility. You notice it when explanations that once satisfied you suddenly sound incomplete. You notice it when you cannot maintain a role without feeling the cost of it in your body. You notice it when the same environment produces a reaction far stronger than the event seems to justify. The outer moment may be small, but the response carries the weight of accumulated misalignment. The field is not reacting only to what happened today. It is registering that today belongs to a structure whose expiration has already been recorded. This can create an unusual grief. Nothing obvious may have been taken from you, yet the meaning of what remains has changed. You may look at an old photograph, enter a familiar room, or repeat a routine you once enjoyed and feel the absence of a frequency that used to animate it. The loss is not always of the object itself. It is the loss of your former agreement with that object, place, or identity. This is why attempts to restore the old normal often fail. You may return to familiar habits, reopen old conversations, revisit old plans, or tell yourself that you should simply be grateful and move on. Yet the signal keeps interrupting the performance. The more firmly you try to occupy the former line, the more obvious the internal resistance becomes, not because you are being punished, but because the field is no longer willing to spend its energy maintaining a false coherence. The person or presence connected to the lock may be part of this recognition, but do not reduce the entire protocol to their personality or their visible actions. The field lock is not a command to chase. It is not permission to invade another person's space or assign certainty where evidence has not appeared. It is a marker that something in the lattice became synchronized enough to alter your perception. The purpose of recognition is not to make you dependent on an external answer. It is to show you which part of your own signal became active when the connection entered the grid. The second recognition is the interruption of your usual emotional anchors. Things that once gave you immediate certainty may stop working. Praise may feel hollow. Distraction may lose its power. You may reach for the familiar explanation and find that it dissolves before it can settle. Even your preferred methods of interpreting signs may become unreliable for a period because the field is clearing the instruments through which you have been reading it. This stage can feel like detachment, but it is more precise to call it signal separation. The field is distinguishing what belongs to your original pattern from what has been activated by the new contact. Some thoughts may feel unusually charged, while others lose all force. Some memories return without emotional ownership, as if they are being reviewed rather than relived. You may realize that a desire you defended for years was connected to an identity you no longer inhabit. The Arcturian observers identify this as a separation phase because the old anchors cannot remain in control while the field is being repositioned. If they did, you would interpret every new signal through an expired architecture. You would turn every pause into rejection, every coincidence into instruction, and every surge of pressure into a reason to act prematurely. The silence is therefore not merely withholding. It is preventing the unresolved part of you from translating a higher-level correction into an old reaction. You may find that even positive attention creates discomfort because it tries to return you to a version of yourself that the field has already outgrown. The familiar compliment, invitation, or reassurance no longer lands in the same place. This does not mean you must reject everything familiar. It means you are learning to distinguish nourishment from reinforcement of an obsolete identity. This is where your discipline is tested. Can you observe the pressure without immediately giving it a story? Can you recognize the signal without turning it into a demand? Can you allow a connection to be real at the level of the field, without forcing it to prove itself through outer behavior before the line is ready? These questions separate recognition from fixation. The lock may be active, but your interpretation must become cleaner than the pattern that first awakened it. The third recognition is confusion before clarity. This phase is often misunderstood because people expect a meaningful shift to produce immediate certainty. But when a field is being corrected, the first movement may create fragmentation. Your thoughts move rapidly and then stop. You feel that something important is near, but you cannot locate it. You become aware of several possible futures and lose confidence in all of them. The mind searches for a single explanation. While the field is still dissolving the conditions that made the old explanation possible, you may experience strange stillness alongside mental pressure. Part of you knows that a decision is forming, while another part refuses to move. You may feel both urgency and delay, as though the timeline is advancing beneath a surface that appears motionless. This is not contradiction without meaning. It is what happens when a line weakens before another route has stabilized. Sleep can become the place where this instability announces itself most clearly. You may fall asleep exhausted but awake and alert, carrying the emotional residue of a conversation that never occurred. Dreams may seem less like stories and more like fragments of routes, a station, a doorway, a face seen from a distance, a road that changes direction. Do not treat every image as an instruction. Notice instead the pattern of transition, separation, and unfinished movement that the field is processing. During this phase, the mind often produces harsh interpretations. You may decide that you are behind, that you missed the opportunity, that the connection has disappeared, or that your inability to define the situation proves it was never real. But uncertainty is not always evidence of absence. Sometimes it is the space created when an old interpretation has been removed and the new one has not yet become strong enough to replace it. The Arcturian pattern is clear. Confusion can appear when the field is protecting a transition from premature closure. If you were given complete clarity too early, You might use it to rebuild the old structure around the new signal. You might make the connection serve the identity that is supposed to be released. Therefore, the protocol allows ambiguity to remain until your field can hold recognition without immediately converting it into control. The fourth recognition is the collapse of repetition. You begin to see the same pattern in several parts of your life, waiting for an explanation, overextending to preserve a bond, silencing your perception to avoid appearing intense, accepting partial presence as if it were complete alignment. What previously looked like separate problems reveals itself as one architecture repeating through different circumstances. This is the point at which the field lock becomes a diagnostic instrument. The connection did not necessarily create every wound, pattern, or delay you are now seeing. It illuminated the places where your energy had already been organized around uncertainty. It exposed the agreements you made with silence before this specific silence ever arrived. It showed you how often you abandoned your own signal while waiting for another field to confirm that you were allowed to trust it. That recognition can be painful because it removes the comfort of blaming one event. Yet it is also the beginning of power. If the entire disturbance depended on another person acting exactly as you hoped, you would remain trapped in observation. But when you see that the lock activated a deeper correction within your own field, you can begin to reclaim the energy that was assigned to monitoring, decoding, and anticipating. Do not mistake reclamation for rejection of the connection. The Arcturian approach is not to deny what the lattice has registered. It is to remove distortion from the signal. A field that is no longer begging for proof can recognize more accurately. A field that is no longer trying to force disclosure can distinguish between genuine resonance and the echoes of fear. The connection becomes clearer when it is no longer being asked to carry your entire sense of direction. The fifth recognition is the bodily and energetic response to a rare protocol. You may notice heaviness that arrives without an obvious external cause, a need for more silence, altered sleep patterns, sudden bursts of energy followed by withdrawal, or a heightened sensitivity to crowded spaces and emotionally dense environments. You may feel your attention narrowing toward what matters and losing tolerance for what does not. Your body may seek stillness before your mind understands why. You may also notice that ordinary choices suddenly carry unusual weight. A message you would once answer immediately remains unanswered. A room feels wrong before anyone speaks. A plan that appears reasonable produces a quiet internal contraction. These are not commands to abandon judgment. They are indications that your field is no longer separating thought from consequence in the old way. The signal is being registered to the whole pattern, not to the mind alone. These experiences are not instructions to ignore practical concerns or dismiss ordinary care. They are signs that your system is processing a level of internal change that cannot be measured only through visible events. The important question is not whether every sensation is supernatural. The important question is whether a consistent pattern is moving through your experience, and whether that pattern is changing what you can and cannot continue carrying. A rare protocol often begins by reducing excess signi. This can feel like isolation, but the purpose is not to exile you from life. It is to lower interference. Certain conversations become exhausting because they pull you back into identities that the field has already marked for release. Certain forms of entertainment feel empty because they keep your attention circulating around patterns that no longer have a future. Even your own internal commentary may become tiring when it repeats the same question without producing new recognition. The body often detects this before the intellect. It withdraws from what the mind still tries to justify. It asks for fewer explanations, fewer performances, and fewer attempts to make the transition appear normal. Listen to the pattern without dramatizing it. The protocol is not asking you to become unreachable. It is asking you to become less available to interference. The sixth recognition is that the visible collapse comes after the invisible decision. By the time a relationship changes, a role ends, a plan dissolves, or a door closes, the field may have been disengaging from it for months. This is why the outer event can feel both shocking and strangely familiar. One part of you is surprised by what happened. Another part has been waiting for the visible structure to catch up with what was already true at the energetic level. You may look back and recognize the early evidence, the loss of vitality, the repeated delays, the inability to restore the former ease, the sudden awareness that you were maintaining something through effort alone. The structure did not necessarily fail because you failed to work hard enough. It may have become unable to carry the frequency that was coming online within you. This is also why some endings feel clean while others remain suspended. A line can be removed from the field before its outer form disappears. The connection may no longer hold the same charge, yet the memory of it continues to activate you. A place may no longer be yours, yet the practical details keep you near it. A role may be over in essence, while the final confirmation takes time. Do not confuse the delay of manifestation with the reversal of correction. The Arcturians observe the interval between invisible collapse and visible reordering with particular precision. It is the interval in which many starseeds return to the old architecture because the new one has not yet become recognizable. They mistake the discomfort of transition for evidence that the former line was safer. But familiarity is not the same as alignment. A weakened structure can feel comforting simply because you already know how to survive inside it. When a route is being removed, delays often gather around it. Plans become difficult to confirm. Necessary pieces fail to arrive. The same conversation is postponed until its meaning changes. These interruptions may look like bad luck when viewed separately, but together they form a pattern of blocked continuation. The timeline is not punishing you with inconvenience. It is refusing to spend further energy, stabilizing a direction that no longer leads where your field is going. The seventh recognition is the threshold where fear attempts to rename correction as punishment. This is the most subtle test because it does not always feel like fear. It may appear as self-accusation, urgency, cynicism, or the desire to shut down your perception entirely. You may tell yourself that you were foolish to notice the signs, foolish to believe the connection mattered, foolish to think that your life could change at the level of the field, but shame is often the final defense of an expired pattern. If the old line can convince you that your perception is the problem, it can restore its authority. If it can make you distrust every inner recognition, you may return to the conditions that produced the original depletion. This is why the protocol brings the question so sharply before you. Will you use your discernment to become clearer, or will you use doubt to erase the evidence of your own transformation? Correction does not mean that every interpretation you have made is accurate. It means that the disruption contains information. You are allowed to refine your understanding without condemning the part of you that first noticed the signal. You are allowed to admit that a connection was meaningful without claiming to know its final outer form. You are allowed to release an expectation while preserving the recognition that something in the field did change. This is where the lock begins to release properly. Not when you force contact. Not when you obtain the answer you imagined. It releases when the signal no longer needs the silence, the waiting, or the emotional pressure to keep you facing the part of yourself that had been dormant. What was held in suspension can then be translated into knowledge, action, completion, or departure. The form may differ from what you expected, but the correction has already accomplished its first purpose. It has made the old way of abandoning your own signal impossible to maintain without awareness. There is a deeper reason this process has felt so personal. The grid did not activate an abstract lesson. It touched the exact point where your identity, your expectation, and your unfinished pattern were already intersecting. That is why the signs felt intimate. That is why the pressure could not be dismissed as a passing mood. The signal found a place in you that was prepared to recognize it, but not yet prepared to understand it. The Council's assessment is that this phase is not asking you to wait passively for someone else to reveal what they feel. It is asking you to observe what the lock revealed about the organization of your own field. Where did you become smaller? Where did you confuse silence with depth? Where did you assign your future to a possibility that had not yet entered visible reality? Where did the connection awaken a capacity that you had been postponing until another field validated it? These questions do not cancel the connection. They separate its true information from the projections that gathered around it. They return your attention to the level where correction can actually occur. The field does not become stable by obtaining endless signs. It becomes stable by obtaining endless signs. It becomes stable when your choices stop contradicting the recognition you have already received. You may now be entering the phase in which the outer world begins to reflect the internal shift more directly. Conversations may end without the conflict you expected. Opportunities may arrive from directions that previously held no meaning. A person may reappear, not necessarily to restore the old pattern, but to show you how differently you now meet the same frequency. A door may close with such finality that you understand why earlier delays were protection rather than denial. Do not rush to label the next movement as the answer. Let it reveal its architecture. A genuine correction creates greater coherence over time, even when it begins with disruption. It does not require you to betray your discernment, abandon your stability, or remain trapped in indefinite interpretation. The field may be mysterious, but it is not asking you to become powerless inside the mystery. What the Arcturians already know is that the process began before the moment you became conscious of it. The lock was not created by your attention to it. Your attention simply made the existing pattern visible. The pressure was not proof that you had invented a connection. It was evidence that your field was trying to register a change that your ordinary identity could not yet classify. You are not going insane. You are not failing in the ordinary sense. You are not being punished for seeing too much or feeling too deeply. But you are being required to stop using an expired structure to explain a newly active field. Your old line is losing coherence because it cannot hold the signal you have become capable of carrying. What feels like emptiness may be signal clearing. What feels like detachment may be separation from interference. What feels like collapse may be the first readable stage of correction. The presence that locked onto your field may have served as a catalyst, a mirror, a threshold marker, or a point of synchronization. Its ultimate role cannot be reduced to the story your fear constructed around it. What matters now is that the lock brought an invisible process into your awareness. It disrupted the pattern that kept you waiting for permission to recognize your own movement. The ultimate revelation is that the field lock was never the final destination. It was the interruption that made your previous direction impossible to ignore. The other presence may have opened the gate, but you are the one whose field must now decide what crosses through it. The signal did not arrive to replace your discernment. It arrived to activate it. The timeline is not asking you to remain suspended between hope and fear. It is asking you to become unavailable to any future that requires you to abandon what you now know. Say this only if it is true enough to enter your field without performance. I do not fear the shift. I recognize it. Let the sentence remain simple. It is not a demand for a certain outcome. It is a declaration that you will no longer call every correction confusion, every ending punishment, or every period of silence proof that you were abandoned by the signal. The line is changing. The release is already underway. What was held in suspension is being translated, and what cannot continue with you is losing access to your future. You do not need to force the grid to reveal everything at once. You need to remain precise enough to notice what becomes lighter when you stop carrying what was never meant to remain attached. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.